pretty good. So overall, I thought the book was really, really good. It was a really great lore book. There's a ton of stuff. I mean, like there's like 300 pages of lore in the book. The general layout of the overall book is you get your factions, and then within you, so you get your factions, you get the rules, and then you get some painting guides at the end. The rules are all available free online, so you can go and check out those downloads. I will have the link to the downloads in the description below. But within the lore specific section, you have for each faction, there's 6 factions plus the 7th, which is very small. But you have the faction overview for each faction. Then it's followed by kind of the key points, moments in history, how they came to be, what really makes them tick. The next section is kind of like the regions they currently inhabit. And then the last section is the unit overview. So there's a bunch of like named units and characters and heroes and stuff, and they kind of give you a little bio and lore for them. Another thing to keep an eye out that I was noticing as I was reading was even within the lore, there are other units or other characters that are named that you don't necessarily see in the end of each section, in each unit section. So those could be future units, but it was just kind of fun to kind of read that and be like, oh, that's something that could possibly come out in a little bit. Aside from just like straight world building and info dumping lore, there's some really awesome excerpts scattered all throughout the book that are things such as letters between 2 correspondents, whether they're romantic individuals or a pilgrim telling you certain things to look out for, or a character recounting a battle, a whole bunch of different more narrative stories, and those are really good too. And they actually give you some of the more, what I would consider more important lore, or like really cool lore that shows up in the world. Aside from that, this is kind of my review, and these are things that I've seen, so I do want to be honest in what I noticed. And so throughout the book, there were quite a few typos I noticed, very, very small things. There were also a few sections that were in Spanish, not like big chunks of text, but like in a letter when somebody would sign off, instead of in English, it would be in Spanish. I also noticed that there was 1 or 2 spots on the maps they provide that were written in Spanish. Along with that, on some of the maps, there were mislabelings. There was like one mislabeling of a city where it talks about the region that city is in, and then you go and look at the map and it's not that city, it's a different city. Yeah, I think it was just more of a copy and paste issue. Now, for me, this isn't like the worst case scenario. I know Corpus Belli is a very small company, and English is not the first language for the company, right? It's a Spanish-speaking company. But that is something that I got. Now, to be fair, and once again, it's not a big deal, I also got a very early copy of the book, so maybe they are, all those typos and stuff are moved away. But because I was doing demos, I got everything like a month early, so it's possible that that was there. So, but it's the first run of Warcrow, and it's just something I wanted to note. I don't think that should hinder you at all. It's an amazing book, but it is something that I noted, so I just wanted to, take a note of it. So some really cool points that I noticed throughout the book. It goes by the different factions. So it starts off with the Hegemony. The Hegemony have a really cool unit called Aggressors. They're probably one of my favorite units, even though I've not seen the models. But essentially, they're really ripped individuals, super muscular, and they have giant weapons. And they actually note in a little narrative piece that aggressors get paid double the amount of a normal soldier because they are the ones in the thick of it. They're the super aggressive ones. So it's going to be really interesting to see that. The Hegemony also have a unit called a War Rig. I'm assuming this is going to be one of our larger 60mm models. Something to do with guns, artillery. I'm thinking kind of like an Empire steam tank. We'll have to see what that looks like. Within the Northern Tribes, one of my favorite things that I read was in this section. There's an area known as the Peat Bogs, and there's a really creepy story that kind of comes about when the Northern Tribes are moving south. They come to this weird bog area, and some creepy stuff happens. And it's kind of like the Dead Marshes from Lord of the Rings. So, keep an eye out for that story. Another cool narrative that we kind of see ever present throughout the Northern Tribes is a rival to Alborg. Alborg is the leader of the Northern Tribes, or at least the group of Northern Tribes we're seeing in the Winds from the North starter set. And so it's really interesting. We've kind of been told that Alborg is like the tough guy, the big guy, but then we find out in this story that there is actually a rival. The last thing that I thought was pretty cool, the Varank, as we've kind of learned, have these spirit totem tattoos, and it allows them to get the benefits of whatever spirit animal they have or spirit totem they have. And so they're pretty, they're pretty cool. We have like the skin changers coming out. We have Northern Merciless, and if you pre-order, you get Alwart Ice Bear, who has the Ice Bear or the Polar Bear totem. But there's a character called Eskold the Executioner, and he's a Varank that received the Warg tattoo. And the Varank don't really like wargs. It's one of the only animals they don't get along with. And so Eskold is kind of like lives on the outskirts type situation, and he hangs out with wargs, at least it says. So I think they said he even has a scythe. So I'm really interested to see kind of how this character looks and how he kind of works with synergies with warg units and stuff, which we know we're definitely getting. The next section in the book are the Scions. They have some interesting things. I wasn't super pumped about the Scions, which are essentially our wood elves, but after reading it, I actually am more interested in them. There's a section about the Ashen. So the wood elves have, or the Scions have these trees that they venerate, and they kind of have a symbiotic relationship with them. And so we learn with the Ashen what kind of happens when those trees get destroyed and how the elves view it, and how the elves kind of deal with catastrophe as well as like ancient cultural norms and stuff. So it was just really interesting. So check that out if you are a big fan of the Scions. Another thing that really pulled me in was that the Scions have a lot of like the Fae type creatures. So they have like winged elves. There's centaurs that have been noted. There's even a hero character that's a centaur. And they even talk about kelpies. So I'm hoping we get some sort of cool death horse from the water units there. There's been a lot of coverage on the Scions already. And so for me in general, I just liked learning a little bit more about the Mornmaw, which is that giant, big, hulking monster. But the one I'm really interested in aren't really Scions. They're just allied with the Scions, which is Nuada and the Red Caps. Nuada is kind of one of the last elven characters from this ancient elven empire that fell the last time the Warcrow came around. And so after he woke up, after thousands of years, hundreds of years, he didn't have his empire anymore. He didn't have anything except for these crazy elemental creatures that are powered purely by emotion. And these are the Red Caps. And so one of the really funny things it notes is that Red Caps are technically immortal, but because they're so dumb, they don't live long. So it's really interesting to see kind of Nuada, who's this beautiful, elegant, amazingly terrifying elven soldier who's really good at his job, having to lead the Red Caps. My mind goes to like Gru and the Minions, but knowing Corvus Belli, he's probably more so based off of David Bowie's Goblin King and the goblins from Labyrinth. So that's going to be really, really fun. I'm pretty much excited about all the goblins, or all these Red Caps, all their units. We've been told that they are pretty chaotic when they get on the battlefield, so that's going to be fun. They also have this giant hulking creature that you see some Red Caps riding. It's like this all-black creature. I found out they're called crucibles, and they literally are crucibles, so they're essentially Red Cap generators. They're these giant golems that are forges for Red Caps. The Red Caps can generate out of them. The Feudum is one of my top 3 factions, along with the Northern Tribes and the Hegemony, and there was a lot of really cool stuff in there. There's a lot of cool narratives, a lot of cool stories. There's a cool power struggle between the Septurnus, who's kind of like the religious leader, and the king. And then as well as another character called Lady Varana. And so Septurnus is basically pulling Palpatine from Star Wars type stuff. He's trying to get more power so he can become really, really powerful. He's kind of doing it subtly. He kind of has his own army. So you get to read about these different, his kind of push for more power. There's a lot of potential in the Feudum stuff for Bloodborne type fantasy, because we have all this gallant knights, shining armor. We have a ton of military or knightly orders, but they've also mentioned how, like Hoopo has mentioned, that she also likes like this Bloodborne aspect, which is kind of like the creepy side of medieval knights. And so there's even some really cool stuff that goes on in the book that talks about this. My favorite narrative out of the entire book is in the Feudum section, and it's all about a bunch of a squad of elite priestesses, and I believe Lady Varana is there, and they go to this town that's on the border of the fog, and because the people of this town have pulled something out of the fog and it goes awry, and so it's just a really cool kind of creepy Bloodborne-ish medieval story with these like super powerful cleric priestesses. Also, there's a character who I'm super hopeful who's going to come out. He's only mentioned in the lore. He's not mentioned in the units. His name is Robin the Outcast. He is an archer. He steals from the rich and wealthy lords, and he gives the money to the priestesses in their monasteries. So obviously, Robin Hood, very excited. I've mentioned Verana of Outgard, a little bit before, a few seconds ago. She's this high priestess. She's really, really cool. I believe she's one of the main characters. She's the character unit we're getting in the Feudum starter box. She does not like Septurnus and kind of his power hungriness. So there's a few articles and stuff of her kind of trying to stop him from doing his various scheming. But she's pretty cool, and she does not. She's pretty zealous in her religion, and she worships Celas. She's a high priestess of Celas, who's the Red Moon goddess. And then, of course, we've seen the Griffin Riders. They're really cool to see how they kind of work. There's some sort of like bond that the Griffin Riders have with their human, or the Griffins and their riders have with each other. So I'm really interested to see kind of how that plays out on the battlefield. Lastly, we have Mount Haven. This is your dwarves. I have a science background. I'm a science teacher, and so there's like a one-page section in here that kind of talks about the different ores that can be mixed with oriclum, which is like the magic ore that gives you all these magic things. And so it was really cool to see kind of the breakdown of how ore mixes and stuff. But aside from that, there's these two units that I'm really interested in. One is called Bombardiers. They are essentially dwarves with mortars or artillery cannons on their back. And it talks about how they like run through the battlefield, and then the cannons, their backpacks like lock down and they launch artillery to the enemy. So I'm just curious to see what that looks like. They also have a unit called Beast Steeds, which are giant mega goats. And I just am really interested to see how that goes. And so I wasn't initially excited for Mount Haven as well, but now it's just yet another faction that I'm very interested in. And this game where they say you only need about 20 minis is easily becoming this game where I want to get all the minis, even though I only need 20. The last faction we get is only 4 pages. 2 of those pages is the title, like the cover page for them. 2 is just a little biography on them, and that's the Merchant Alliance. This is going to be what I'm assuming is the next new faction we'll get, sometime down the road once the game has hit the ground and all other factions have been fleshed out. The Merchant Alliance is in the far southeast of the map. They kind of cover a little strait, or a channel that connects this ocean to the rest of the world. So there's not a lot about them in their own lore section, but there is other stuff throughout the rest of the book that's talking about them, because they're kind of like this slowly rising empire. But one thing I'm very excited about are pirates. They mention pirates. I've always wanted to have a game that kind of has pirates in it, that, with a bunch of other stuff going on, but I really like the pirates. So I'm excited to see where that goes. But right now they're just focused on being sneaky, kind of more political. But it does open up this idea, because within their lore and some of the other factions' lore, it does talk about other empires and factions that we've not seen yet. The orcs are running away from something we haven't seen in the north. The Hegemony has fought things from the south, and the Merchant Alliance has also had dealings with things from the south and the east. So it's really, really cool. But overall, like I said, I really loved the book. If you can, pick up this lore book. It's the first run of Warcrow. It's the first edition of the lore book and the rule book. I think it's a really awesome thing to pick up. I do not know if this is ever going to be a PDF copy, but that you can buy from the company. It does a really good job at kind of nuancing every single faction. So the orcs are not just these bloodthirsty individuals. The Hegemony is not like this elite, merciless empire. All of these factions are very, human, even though some of them aren't actually human, but they have these very nuanced approaches to things. And so even one scenario, like one battle, you get, you have 2 different factions that were fighting in this battle. You get 2 very different viewpoints as to what's happening and why they're fighting and all this stuff. So it's presented really, really well. And it's not like how some other fantasy or sci-fi games will present it, where everybody's evil and everybody is, they're xenophobic, they're going to kill everything that's not them. This world, Lindworm, is a little bit different than that. And so it's more like they all have their own narratives, their own stories, and they are all the heroes of their stories. And so what happens when those different heroes run into each other. So that's my overall review of the book. I thought it was really, really great. Pick it up if you can. Please like and subscribe. And if you want me to do any other videos, just let me know down below, and I'll try to get to them when I can. But aside from that, stay out of the fog and have a great day.